Commissioner Donaldson?
Here.
Commissioner Hoff?
Here.
Commissioner Steinberg?
Present.
Vice Chair Cardoza?
Here.
Chair Flores?
Here.
Commissioners Coomerly and Sherman have excused absences this evening, so we have a quorum of 5 commissioners.
Okay, please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, public comment. Anyone here to speak on items not on the agenda? Seeing none. The action recap, emotions or changes? Yes, go ahead, Art.
On page 4, item C, down at the bottom it says, Commissioner Hoff said sign appears quite large. He said sign square footage should not be larger than the side of the building.
Oh.
That would be quite a large sign. I think what I said is it should not be larger than the linear
Okay,
foot of the frontage of the building.
I think that's what we meant, but it could be worded a little more clearly.
I mean, that's larger than even I wanted. That's my correction.
Than the width of the frontage. Okay.
And move approval.
I'll second.
Okay. That was Chair Flores seconding? Is that without objection,
No.
I assume? Okay.
Okay, Director's report, Charlie.
All right, first with regard to the City Council and their recent actions since your last meeting in March, they have only had one meeting on April 5th because, as you may know, the April 19th meeting was canceled for Passover. They did do a number of things at the April 5th meeting that were planning related. They passed a resolution vacating a portion of Stanford Avenue to facilitate a property swap with the owners of the 5701 Hollis building with the city parking lot for a wider greenway. This may sound familiar because at their previous meeting they passed a resolution of intent to vacate the street, but on April 5th they actually vacated it. It's a multi-step process they have to go through. As you may recall, this was recommended for approval by the Commission at your January meeting. Concerning sewer laterals, which are the pipes that connect buildings to the sewer main in the middle of the street, a portion of which is on the public right-of-way and a portion of which is on private property. This is not really directly related to the Commission and your actions, but it does affect development and real estate in the city. The Council introduced an ordinance amending the municipal code to require property owners to have a verification test of their sewer laterals and to replace those laterals if they fail the test under one of 3 circumstances. One, when they sell the property. Secondly, before obtaining a building permit for construction valuation of more than $100,000. And third, if they change the size of their water meter. This ordinance also requires grease interceptors for new and remodeled food service establishments, which was a requirement previously enforced by East Bay Mud. It will now be enforced by the city. This ordinance was prepared in response to a lawsuit that was filed by the U.S. EPA and the Regional Water Quality Control Board against East Bay Mud and the cities that it serves, including Emeryville. And final passage is expected on May 3rd. Concerning food vendors, the Council introduced an ordinance related to food and non-food vendors in the public right-of-way. It was based on the recommendations of the Street Vendor Task Force that the Council had previously appointed to study that issue. Food vendors would have to obtain a permit from the police department as well as a business license, and they'd be subject to a number of restrictions, including hours from 6 a.m. to midnight, a 200-foot separation from brick-and-mortar restaurants and other mobile food vendors, and a prohibition from locating in the RM medium-density residential zone, which is basically the Triangle and Doyle Street neighborhoods and Emery Bay Village, as well as the Shoreline Management Zone, which is the East Shore State Park. Non-food vendors would be subject to similar regulations with hours from 8 a.m. to 7 p.m. The ordinance also covers farmers markets, which would get a single permit for all of their vendors, and hence their individual vendors would not be subject to the 200-foot separation from each other, which wouldn't make much sense for a farmer's market. Final passage of that ordinance is likewise expected on May 3rd. And speaking of farmers markets, the council approved a resolution allowing the Island Earth Farmers Market over here on Haven Street to continue to operate through July 28th. The council adopted the Powell Street Urban Design Plan, which was a bit of a milestone. This is the plan that was prepared by WRT and has been in the works for several years. It's had a lot of community meetings and workshops and study sessions before you and the council. And it's now the official city plan for those blocks of Powell Street between Christie and Frontage Road. So pretty exciting, and let's hope it gets implemented. Finally, the council heard the same presentation that you are going to hear tonight on the Sustainable Community Strategy Initial Vision Scenario, and they approved the mayor's signing of a comment letter, which is included in your packet and which Diana will be talking about in just a minute. So that's it for the April 5th council meeting. A couple of other items concerning appeals. The commission's decisions at your last meeting on March 24th on both Escuela Bilingüe and the marketplace entry canopy and signs have been appealed to the city council. At their next meeting on May 3rd, the council will set the hearing dates for both appeals. We anticipate that the marketplace appeal hearing will be set for May 17th. The council will have to decide on the hearing date for Escuela Bilingüe after hearing from all the parties, because some of them have indicated that they won't be available to attend the various upcoming city council meetings. Chair Flores has indicated to me that he will represent the commission before the council at both appeal hearings, and I will certainly let him know as soon as those dates are set. Concerning the zoning update, the steering committee met on Tuesday, 2 days ago, and heard a status report on staff's work to date, as well as a briefing on the general plan and housing element annual report and the Sustainable Community Strategy Initial Vision Scenario, which are both on your agenda tonight. Concerning the zoning update, our next steps for staff are to complete our review of the sections on non-conforming uses, administration, and subdivisions, and to review the other sections as the drafts become available. The next steering committee meeting will be June 28th. Finally, on Sherwin-Williams, the State Department of Toxic Substance Control, or DTSC, is hosting a community open house this coming Monday, May 2nd, starting at 5:30 p.m. here in the council chambers. This will be on the draft community safety plan for the cleanup of the Sherwin-Williams site. This meeting this coming Monday is at the same time as the Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Committee meeting, which will be downstairs in the garden level. If you missed the previous community open house, which conflicted with your March meeting, so you, of course, did miss it, and you aren't planning to attend the BPAC meeting on Monday, you might want to attend this community open house on the Sherwin-Williams site cleanup. So that concludes my report. I'd be happy to respond to any questions you may have.
I have a comment.
Yes.
I hope Commissioner Flores, when he represents us on the marketplace, that he will be gracious enough to give both sides of the issue.
He assured me that he will.
I was going to comment that if any of the nay votes wanted to attend, they're certainly welcome to, but I'll try to give a good account of the votes that night. Any more questions for Charlie? Thank you, Charlie. So we have no public hearings tonight, a study session, Sustainable Community Strategy, and then an administrative item. So Diana Keaton.
Good evening, Commissioners. This is about the Regional Sustainable Community Strategy Initial Vision Scenario. The ABAG, the Association of Bay Area Governments, and the Metropolitan Transportation Commission, MTC, are preparing this strategy in response to state law and figuring out where we can have development in the Bay Area to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. The initial vision scenario is the first idea to be put out for people to respond to, and then more scenarios will be developed in response to our response. So ABAG foresees or proposes that residential development occur mostly in the transit corridors that hug the bay in the southern 5 counties of the region. In the upper left-hand corner, you can see Emeryville's priority development area, and that blue cross hatching is the San Pablo Avenue Transit Corridor. So all the priority development areas that were on transit corridors were seen as places that more population could be. ABAG and MTC asked the cities to answer some questions, and we've answered them in a letter from the mayor, but the process is still open, so we can still make more comments. And the questions they asked is the place type appropriate? We'll define that in a second. Is the household growth they've put in Emeryville appropriate? And if not, where else should we put it? What transportation improvements would be needed, and what additional funding would be needed for other things in order to accommodate this growth? MTC has a station area planning guide, and it lists several different place types and has different criteria and numbers that define them. And Emeryville fits pretty well into the city center place type. If you extend the general plan from its horizon of 2030 to 2035, and you get a population of about 10,000 total. Households. 10,000 households in the city. But the problem is that the initial vision scenario puts about 13,000 households in the city in 2035. So as you can see here, the general plan is the bottom line. 2030 is the general plan's endpoint, and then extending that same growth rate to 2035, you see the 10,000, and then the initial vision scenario shows about 13,000 in 2035. On the other hand, ABAG has not yet distributed jobs to the priority development areas. So the jobs that they show for Emeryville are lower than the jobs in the Emeryville general plan, even if you take their 2035 and compare it to our 2030. And as you may recall from the general plan process, the first thoughts about the general plan were analyzed and found to have a ratio of residential to employment development that was not fiscally good. So the general plan was revised and ended up with that orange line, which is the fiscal balance of residential and employment growth. The initial vision scenario puts us at the blue line, which we don't want. The percentage household growth during the 25 years of the Sustainable Community Strategy, Emeryville is not the highest in the region, but it's the highest in the county at 130%. If you take the general plan and extend it to 2035, the growth rate over that 25 years is 76%. So our city manager was saying, well, we should ask other cities to approach our growth rate rather than adding more growth where the cities have had planned to accommodate some. The job growth projection, if you look at the blue roller coaster, that's what's happened in the last 20 years in the region. The X's are because ABAG includes self-employed in their numbers and the Department of Finance does not. They're the line. And the projection line, I think, is the Department of Finance type of number. So in the last 10 years, if you just look at the endpoints, growth has been about 10,000 jobs per year in the region. If you look at the projection line, that's about 50,000 jobs per year. It's about the same rate that was happening in the 60s and that ABAG has been using ever since. So a lot of people in the county are saying maybe their job projections are higher than is going to be reality. And maybe if we assume twice the growth rate of the last 20 years, we would have a line that would end in 2035 about where that top X is. So if we did have all this growth, what would we need? We would need better bus service, vastly improved bus service of AC Transit up and down San Pablo Avenue and of Emeryville across San Pablo Avenue, and bus stops and all the things that go with them. We would need a fixed route Tri-City service. That's the EBOT proposal that's been proposed, and a lot of streetscape and bikeway improvements. And all the regional transportation plan projects that we just put into the process, which include items for every mode. And we would also need funding for parks, for wastewater, stormwater, and water facilities and supply, and for the Emeryville Center for the Arts and the ECCL, and we would probably need a new police station on the east side of town. And either we would need redevelopment to still be around, or we would need some other way to have public-private partnerships to get people to build in this corridor. So in the letter to ABAG MTC, what we said was the place type is correct, but the number of households should be in the middle of the place type range. The growth rate and mix should match the general plan for fiscal stability. And when it comes to regional growth distribution, we should ask the other cities to step up to somewhere near what the Emeryville general plan's growth rate is. The regional job growth projection may be too high, and we would need help with all modes of transportation improvements to support this growth, as well as funding for parks, water, culture, public safety, and redevelopment. So that's what we wrote, and that concludes my presentation, and I can answer any questions and take any comments.
Thank you, Diana. Any initial questions? Go ahead, Steve.
Quick question. If the population growth is going up so high, why is not the employment going up in concurrence with it?
When the Association of Bay Area Governments produced this initial vision scenario, they concentrated the household growth in the residential, in the transit-rich areas around the bay, but they did not do that with the jobs. And it's not just because they didn't get around to it and they ran out of time. It's partly because they have to think about where the employers would really go. And I think then they do plan to do that for the next scenario. I'm going to a meeting on Tuesday that's about alternative scenarios, and they've said they want to put the jobs in the priority development areas in the next scenarios.
Do those statistics include people that work from home?
I'm not sure. The Department of Finance statistics, when they tell you how many jobs they are, they don't, people that work from home. Oh, that's different from self-employed. I would say that if you're employed by a company and you telecommute, it would be in the DOF's numbers. If you have a home occupation and you're self-employed, they might not be in DOF's numbers, but ABAG is definitely aware of them, and they do include them.
Okay, thank you.
So could you explain a little bit more what are the implications of this at the end? I mean, if we are we supposed to meet these numbers or not, and what happens if we don't? And that
the Sustainable Community Strategy is going to be an input to the two things. It's just now going to be used for setting priorities for the regional transportation plan and transportation funding that gets allocated through MTC. And it's also going to be used for setting the regional housing needs allocation that cities use to prepare their housing elements of their general plans, which then if the state approves those, then we're eligible for various infrastructure grants and things like that. So the idea of the SCS is to come up with a regional program that if the cities get with it, they can get carrots. Because the state doesn't change the fact that the local governments do control land use. Does that make sense?
Well, if I can elaborate a little further, as Diana said, the regional housing need allocation is required in the future to be consistent with the Sustainable Community Strategy. And as you may know, the city, every city and county's housing element has to accommodate their regional housing need allocation, the number of housing units that we get from ABAG or from the state. We have to accommodate that within our housing element. That is to say, we have to have property zoned that would allow that amount of housing development to occur. And, well, you don't have to have that, but if you don't have it, you won't get your housing element certified by the State Office of Housing and Community Development, which means you won't be eligible for housing grants and other things. So there's a huge incentive, and every city, of course, wants their housing element to be certified. So essentially, our zoning is going to have to conform to the Sustainable Community Strategy if we want our housing element to get certified in the future.
But we were just certified, and so
We were
5
just-
more years.
Yeah, but the new housing element cycle has already begun.
Right.
for the next
we're
one, the next one that will be 2014 to 2022, I think.
So when they looked at Emeryville, it looks from the graphic like they include the entire city in the PDA, is that right?
They don't include the entire city in the PDA, but they did project how much growth would be in the entire city, and they did guess that there would be 224 units outside the PDA in the city. I don't know where that came from, but we are corresponding with the county about how much growth we think will be where in town, and I really don't see any household growth outside the PDA. A little bit of job growth, but not hardly any household growth.
There is one, back up a second on the PDA. The PDA, the priority development area, was defined by us. We determined what the boundaries of the PDA were when we applied for it a couple of years ago to ABAG. So that's what they're using as the PDA, is our boundaries. There is one change area that's identified in the general plan that is outside the PDA, and that is the Shell gas station and Hilton Garden Inn site on Frontage Road, because the PDA doesn't go past the freeway. And there is that one little site that's west of the freeway. That's a change area, which, if I recall correctly, is zoned mixed use with residential. So it's not residential?
It's zone mixed use, non-residential.
Okay. I know the rest of Watergate office is non-residential. Well, if the residential can't go there, then I don't know where it goes outside the PDA, because the only other places are the Triangle and the Doyle Street neighborhood, and we're not going to squeeze 200 more housing units in those neighborhoods.
So do they give any consideration to city's intents about neighborhood character?
Not at this stage.
It's more of a regional broad brush approach. They're trying to put a lot of housing in the region, because now they are trying to reduce incommuting by housing all the employees within the region. So they're dumping more theoretical future housing into each city in this scenario than any of the cities are planning for.
Well, my one comment that I have is I counted, there are 109 jurisdictions listed, and there are only 2 that have a higher target than Emeryville, and there are actually only 6 that have a higher target than what our general plan already states. So if that could be pointed out to them, I don't understand the rationale for it. It doesn't seem very equitable.
I think they just took however high everybody was and added to that. So the cities that already were planning to accommodate some growth, they put more in.
I think it falls into the category of no good deed goes unpunished.
But we'll see what happens for the next scenarios.
They looked at our real growth and they added to that.
There's that too, yes.
So this letter that the city council put out through the mayor basically points out that they're not realistic, and that they should really be looking at our general plan and our housing element to really look at our true projections, and that's good. Any more questions for staff?
Is there anything else in this process that the Planning Commission could or should be doing?
Well, let's see, what's next?
I can mention one thing. There is a community workshop coming up. If you are interested in attending it, you'll hear
ABAG community workshop?
Yeah, you'll hear the same spiel, but you'll hear it from ABAG and MTC, and you can grill them with your questions. And I didn't bring
This is specifically for Emeryville?
No, it's for
Okay.
Alameda County.
Oh.
They're having 9 workshops throughout the region, one in each county, and actually I have it in my calendar because I'm planning to go to it.
It's going to be in Berkeley at the
At the
Brower Center.
on the 19th?
The 19th, she
19th, yes,
remembers.
thank you.
May 19th.
5 p.m. at the David Brower Center on Alston Way and Oxford Street in downtown Berkeley on Thursday, May 19th, starting at 5 p.m. is a community workshop on this.
So
Topic.
that's a presentation of this initial vision scenario. Now, the Regional Advisory Working Group, which is developing the SCS, is going to meet on Tuesday, and they will be looking at the next round of alternative scenarios. So it'll be interesting to hear what they're saying about how to develop that. Meanwhile, each county is developing its own idea of what it thinks it should be. And that's why I've been corresponding with them about where we really see growth and how much growth we really see here. So the county can put that together, and the county is, meanwhile, we have call for transportation projects. The county is gathering up projects and going to submit that to MTC in May as well.
And there is this timetable in your packets. This isn't the whole thing because I believe it's 2013 that this sustainable community strategy has to be adopted, but there are a number of future iterations of this that are going to occur, and certainly we will be briefing the commission and the council every time another iteration comes out, and you can give us your comments and we'll give those back to ABAG and MTC.
So how does this impact the zoning updates that we're making right now?
I would say at this point it doesn't. I mean, it will, if anything, it will in the future affect the general plan. We may have to amend our general plan to conform to the sustainable community strategy after it's adopted in 2013. Certainly our next housing element will have to be consistent with it. I can't think of anything in the zoning ordinance itself that we'd need to amend at this point, but we may have to in the future. Some of the densities might have to change or whatever.
And bonuses, incentives for density?
Yeah, well, we already have that. So, I mean, I suppose we could beef those up, but maybe it would be better to send that around to other cities as a model.
Look what we did.
Yeah.
Maybe if everybody else did that,
Yeah.
we wouldn't have 129% growth.
Right, there's another
Needed.
120, there's another 103 jurisdictions that are way
Right.
below us, and Piedmont's like 0.3 or
Well,
something.
I think Charlie hit it nail on the head. You know, we've done such a good job, and people look at Emeryville and think that we're the model of growth and sustainability, really. And so why wouldn't we just continue to be the champion of that? But in reality, 1.2 square miles, we've sort of, you know, built out in most of our neighborhoods. So there's only room to go up. So any
Do
more?
they really think they're going to have any money for all these transportation projects that they're using
the
as
money
carrots?
question.
Well, I've looked at a draft list today from the county, and although they do have the Ashby interchange in there, they have a list of projects that were in the plan two years ago, whenever the last plan was, that they're crossing out a bunch of freeway interchanges and stuff like that. So if you take the money that was going to be spent on freeway projects and divvy it up among bus stops and bike lanes, and it might go pretty far. There might be some money.
Well, thank you, Diana. Keep us posted on the meetings, and maybe send out an email to us reminding us about the May 19th workshop. I think that would be a good place to
I
start.
did send an email out to the Zoning Update Steering Committee about that yesterday, and I copied the Planning Commission. So
Okay, so
you
we
should
missed
already
that.
have that information.
Thank you. Okay, no public hearings. Our next item is administrative item, General Plan Annual Progress Report. I figured Ms. Diamond was here for a reason.
So our General Plan Project Manager, Deborah Diamond, and Catherine Furpo from the Housing, Economic Development and Housing Department will present this report.
No, that's not it.
It's a desktop cleanup.
Okay.
As soon as we find it. It's not that status
Second.
report one?
No, I think this was from, oh yeah, that's it, I think. Yes, this is it. Okay, great. Oops. Okay. Good evening, Chair Flores and members of the Planning Commission. Deborah Diamond with planning staff. I'm pleased to be here tonight to present you with our annual report on the progress of the general plan for year 2010. I'm here with Catherine Furpo, who you may know, who is our housing coordinator in the Economic Development and Housing Department. And Catherine prepared the annual report on the housing element, that portion of this report, and that was approved by the Housing Committee earlier this month. And this annual progress report will be heard by the City Council at their May 17th meeting and then forwarded to the state. Tonight I'm just going to give a brief presentation, and then Catherine and I will be here to answer any questions that you may have. So an annual report on the general plan is a state requirement. The city reports annually to the Housing and Community Development Department on the progress of the housing element, but this is the first year that there will be a report on the entire general plan. And so the report goes to both HCD and the Office of Planning and Research in the state government. You may recognize this. This is how the Emeryville general plan corresponds to the 7 mandated elements that are mandated by state law. And most of the elements are included in one document called the Emeryville General Plan, and then there's a separate document for the housing element because it's on a separate schedule and has different specific requirements by the state. So I'm going to give you the highlights of what was accomplished for the year 2010 by each element, starting with the land use element. And as you know, the zoning regulations are key to implementing the land use element. And in 2010, the city made strides towards the development of a new zoning code, which would fit the requirements of the general plan. And until a new zoning code is in place, we have our interim zoning regulations to implement the general plan. And also, under permitting and new development, achievement of the city's land use goals are largely done through private development and the work of the Commission and the Planning and Building Department. And although last year wasn't as active as previous years, there were a number of developments that advanced. And here's a list of some that are a little more high profile. And for the transportation element, Emeryville is not working on one bridge, but 2. And we're well into updating the pedestrian and bicycle plan, which was started last year. We've also started a transportation impact fee study, and the Commission saw the draft sustainable transportation plan, I believe, at their last meeting. And under the topic of parks, open space, public facilities, and services, the Parks and Recreation Strategic Plan has been adopted. Last November, the voters approved a $95 million measure to build the Emeryville Center for Community Life, and the Emeryville Center for the Arts is well on its way with a nonprofit organization in place and an architect selected working on the plans. And 2010 was another good year for urban design in Emeryville. The 2010 Emeryville Design Guidelines were adopted, and the Powell Street Urban Design Plan, which Charlie mentioned earlier, were finalized, and the plan was recently adopted by the City Council. Conservation, safety, and noise. At the end of the year, agreements with Waste Management of Alameda County for long-term waste collection and disposal were finalized, and these will assist the city in meeting its waste diversion mandates. And also, the city has been participating with a number of regional agencies to address the threat of sea level rise. This city staff has joined a team to identify transportation and other infrastructure that may be vulnerable to rising tides. And then under the sustainability element, as you may know, the renovation of the police station is designed for LEED Silver, so that'll be a civic green building. and not a big project, but in 2010 the city brought the farmers market to town, along with it bringing locally grown and produced organic food. And then finally the housing element. 2010 was not a great year for housing production, but several projects that involve affordable units have made some headway. And the city continues to implement the housing element through its many assistance programs, including the rehabilitation program, down payment assistance, and foreclosure prevention, among others. So those are the highlights, but I also want to refer you to the exhibits in your report for more specific tracking of the implementation programs. Chapter 8 of the general plan spells out the implementation program for all of the elements except for the housing element. And so within the first year after adoption, the city made progress or completed 65 of the 79 actions. And this is for a 20-year plan. So that's no small feat. That's a lot of progress just in 1 year. And then for the housing element, Chapter 6 of the housing element is the housing action plan, and Exhibit B, there's a table C there that tracks the progress on the housing element. And although many of the 59 policies and programs reflect ongoing city activities, there was only one program that had no specific action in 2010. So I think it's fair to say that in Emeryville, our plans don't just sit on our shelf. Okay, so in terms of a recommendation, we're asking that the commission forward the annual progress report to the City Council with a recommendation for approval. And that concludes my presentation. Catherine and I are here if you have questions.
Thank you, Deborah.
So if you wonder why the planning staff sometimes looks exhausted, this is why.
Well, it's a good annual progress report, and like you say, even though it's a down time, we're still active in all elements of our general plan, and that's a good sign for things to come in the next couple of years. Any comments or questions for staff regarding this, or motions to move this to City Council?
I'd so move.
Moved by Cardoza. I'll second.
Okay. Shall we take a roll call?
Sure.
All right. Commissioner Donaldson?
Aye.
Commissioner Hoff?
Aye.
Commissioner Steinberg?
Aye.
Vice Chair Cardoza?
Aye.
Chair Flores?
Aye.
5 ayes. We'll forward this to the council with your recommendation that they approve it.
Thank you so much for the presentation, and the report looks great.
And thank you for all the good work, too.
Yeah. We'll look forward to a more lengthy report in 2012, I guess, or 2011.
Thank you.
Commissioner comments? I did hear that there was a meeting at Temescal Park this weekend, a community meeting regarding design of the park or monies that were going to go in.
Presentation on the housing element?
I don't know. Anyway, let me finish my thought. I got an email from the Temescal, from the Triangle Neighborhood Group, that there was a meeting in the park about design elements of the park that the city is planning. But you guys look confused, and Charlie
I
especially.
didn't know about that.
Okay. I was going to ask if you knew anything about that, but you don't. So I'll ask.
I'll look into it. and
I'll
get
ask
back
who
to you.
sent it out, and then I'll follow up.
Okay.
But it was this Saturday, or this Sunday at noon, so.
This coming Sunday or
I mean,
last
the
Sunday?
7th.
It's at
The
the
7th.
7th.
I'm sorry, the 7th.
That's a week
at
from
noon.
Saturday.
Yeah, next
It's
Saturday.
on May 7th?
May 7th.
Oh, okay. I thought you were
I'm
saying
sorry,
it was
I
already held.
apologize.
I'll check into that and see what that's about.
Thanks. Art, you had a question?
There's a whole section here called Annual Element Progress.
I don't think you can hear
Housing
me.
element. Were we going to get a presentation?
Deborah
on that?
reported on that. That was one of her slides.
But she didn't go into any depth on any of these
No, she
items.
didn't. It was an overview.
She gave us an overview, but she didn't get into it. You
But
had
if
your
you have-
moment to ask questions.
If you have questions, we'll,
I have
Make them.
several questions, but I'll put it off to another day.
Okay.
all right.
I'm sure she'd be happy to meet you privately, too. Or you can come to one of our Housing Advisory Committee meetings and you can ask there, too, because Catherine Furpo is there
Next Wednesday.
next
We-
Wednesday.
we- I think,
I mean, Art, Art, if you have some questions, I'm sure staff would come up. It's a slow night, and I'd be
true.
happy to have her come up.
You're right.
What do you
Yeah,
think?
Okay. Yeah, I would note that the commission's already voted unanimously to
Fine.
forward
Yes, we
this
have.
report, so
Questions?
any questions would just be for clarification purposes at this point?
No questions? Okay,
Okay.
thank you. Any other comments? Meeting adjourned.